Welcome to Google Ads Unleashed, the podcast that helps you harness the power of Google Ads. And now your host, Jeremy Young.
Hello and welcome back to Google Ads Unleashed, guys. Hope everyone is doing fine in the run up to Christmas. Only a few more weeks to go and then e-commerce will take a little break. So I really want to bring some final tips for you for the end of 2024, which will make your Google Ads lives easier. And this week I want to talk about something that's pretty obvious, but still very much underused, and that is feed rules. What are they? What can you do then to use them? And what are some sort of common tips that I give around it? So generally speaking, I've already said multiple times on the podcast, actually upgrading your feed and having proper feed rules like a proper high quality feed is one of the biggest things you can do to improve your performance as an e-commerce media buyer on Google Ads. Having good product titles, having good photos, having good all of the attributes. So for instance, from Google product category to product type to color to material to what energy efficiency class, size, whatever it is, in the feed is absolutely instrumental in Google matching the right search terms to your product. And the more information you feed Google, the better Google Ads can do their job. So many people neglect this, right? And the thing is, there's so many instances where you can actually improve your feed, right? So most of you guys will be on Shopify. There's tons of instances where you can interfere as a media buyer in order to polish up the feed before it actually appears on the Google Shopping tab. And that is within Shopify itself. So for instance, if your feed is set to a rule that it takes the SEO product titles, well, you can optimize the SEO product titles there already. Then the feed is pumped into Merchant Center. You can go into the Google and YouTube app if you use that, or some process or whatever you use, to then optimize the feed there. So there's another opportunity there. Some of you may even use something like actionable or something like Data Feed Watch, which is another instance in between the feed and the actual outcome, where you will deploy certain rules or certain optimizations before then the end product is published into Merchant Center. You may even edit the items directly in Merchant Center, which is the final thing that overwrites everything, and optimize it there before it gets published to Google Ads. Or you may use something called feed rules. And the reason I propose feed rules very often as sort of very easy snagging mechanism is because you can make some very easy rules and you can simply add them into your Merchant Center and set and forget. Yeah, you never have to think about them anymore at all, and it makes your life super easy. And also it reduces your work, because let's say for instance you've got a feed rule in there where it looks at the product description, and every time it sees the word red, it just adds the color red to your feed. Then you never ever have to think about it anymore, right? As setting the right color in your feed, because that's a repetitive task, and setting a feed rule is the absolute easiest way in order to reduce repetitive tasks. So today I'm just going to give you a bit of an insight into what feed rules you can set up and how it all works. So first of all, something that you need to make sure in Merchant Center next is when you head to the cog wheel, the settings at the top right, that you then head to add-ons and make sure that in the Discover tab, you make sure that you actually have activated an add-on called Advanced Data Source Management. Without that, you will not be able to actually use feed rules in Merchant Center properly. Okay. So this is the first thing that you then need to make sure is on. And then finally, you can head to data sources and then onto your main feed where you want to add a feed rule. You will see two tabs then, data source setup and attribute rules, and you will want to navigate to attribute rules where you can then absolutely edit every single attribute that exists in Merchant Center and within Google Ads. So you can click on attribute rule. You can see all your processed attributes or your custom processed attributes. Usually you would want to look at the processed attributes or the attributes which may come from a subfeed. So you may be using a subfeed to overwrite certain things already, which is a sort of a feed rule, right? The rule is take the attribute from the subfeed, fall back onto whatever's in the main feed if you find nothing in the subfeed. And then you can actually adjust certain things here. So common things which I use feed rules for is, let's say, if you need to optimize a certain attributes such as brand. Very often I've got brands, for instance, which are print on demand brands, who in Shopify have their supplier in the brand field because that's how the backend works. But then I want to change the brand name to the actual brand that I'm working with, right? So this is a feed rule that I use quite often. Or a feed rule I use quite often is color as well. So for instance, what I said before, if in the title there's a certain color mentioned, then boom, it automates the color in the color field. Or it does the same with gender, for instance. If I have a client who sells watches, right? So I've got a list of model numbers and I've got a list of where it says men or male or female or unisex. It then optimizes that automatically as well based on the feed rule that I have set. So this is really handy to do, and I'm just going to walk you through now what is actually doable. Let's do, for instance, color as an example. So there's two ways you can replace data and do rules. So first of all, you can either replace attribute data. This is pretty straightforward. You can, for instance, do a condition. Let's say, for instance, a condition would be if title contains red, then you can set color to red, and then you can create lots and lots of ways to replace the attribute data, lots of rules to replace the attribute data. You can even go a little bit more advanced, and you can sort of set it, for instance, to words that you find in the source's value. So let's say if, for instance, in the source in the source description, let's say, you have the word red, then you can set the attribute data to red. So you can even do sort of advanced rules like that. You can also take the latest and most recent value from your data source for this attribute. So for instance, you can replace certain fields with another field, right? So what would be a good one here? Let's say, for instance, you want your product ID. Let's say your product ID, you don't want to use your normal Shopify item ID, and instead you want your GTINs to be your item ID, then you can just simply replace it with another value. The other alternative that you can do instead of replacing the attributes directly is you can prepend a word or a phrase directly before this attribute. This can be quite handy, for instance, or append even, so put it at the end. This can be quite handy, for instance, if you want to do like a generic phrase which you want to add to all of your products. For instance, one of our clients is in the travel niche, right? So they sell travel products, and there we have simply appended gift idea for travelers at the end of absolutely every product, because they are literally good gift ideas for travelers. So instead of having to actually adjust the wording in every single listing, or to go into Shopify and change the SEO title, which we're not allowed to do because they have an SEO agency, we simply appended this phrase directly after the title attribute. You can find and replace stuff. So for instance, let's say you want to stay, instead of used or something like that, you want to say pre-owned, for all of your words in your product titles, and you can simply replace it. Or let's say, for instance, you have odd colors in the shop, right? So your store, for instance, denotes colors very oddly. Let's say in the product titles, you have something like zebra as a color to denote black and white. You can then just simply replace the word zebra with black and white in the product title, and boom, you got a very easy way to replace the data in your feed. You can even do very advanced operations as well. So for instance, you can split and choose. You can sort of split words into segments, and some of them, and use some for this attribute and some for this, or you can actually delete certain elements as well. So all in all, what feed rules are all about is you want to identify what the problem is, where the issue lies. Like for instance, you want to make a sweeping sort of change to a certain attribute. Then you want to decide, do I want to replace it completely with something else using a rule, or do I just want to modify that attribute? So for instance, title, I just want to add something at the end, or I want to just replace a word or something like that. And then you need to think of, how do I cleverly put all of these rules together so that for all future products which someone may upload to my feed, this rule will still work and will still apply. So you can even use feed rules in some sort of apps, like for instance, Actionable is basically all about feed rules, right? Or if you use Data Feed Watch, it's all about feed rules, where you can then intelligently design rules that apply to all future products. This is something that you may have to update from time and time again as well, in order to ensure that it's up to date, and make sure that just all of the rules work with each other and that they all make sense. Maybe one final thing, some common rules which I would use all the time. So for instance, a very common rule that I would use pretty much at any given point would be something, for instance, like using custom labels, right? So generally speaking, we, for instance, use a lot of feed rules for some of the custom labels we use to group products into bestsellers versus the rest. But the biggest tip that I actually have is, let's say, for instance, you will always have products which will have a sale price, right? Certain products will carry a sale price, and it's good practice to usually advertise them a little bit more. Pop all of the products which have a sale price, because they convert better, into a separate campaign, and give it additional budget and let it rip. Now, instead of having to manually sort through the products all the time in that campaign, it's much easier to just create a feed rule in Merchant Center, where you can then give a custom label 0, for instance, the rule, where I would then head to our feed rule. So I would go to attribute rule, go to the to our processed attributes, go to, for instance, custom label 0, and then I would make a replaced attribute data rule, where I would say if sale price, if sale price has a value, then set, for instance, the custom label to sale, right? So what that does, it automatically every day gives the custom label 0 to all products which are having a sale badge and which have a sale price. And then you can actually have a rule within your PMax campaign or shopping campaign with all of your shopping on sale products in there, which carry the custom label 0. So what happens is, if your client changes the prices within Shopify, and there's a new subset of products which are on sale, then they are just dynamically advertised without your input. So this is what I mean about using feed rules very cleverly to edit certain data, so it helps your entire Google Ads architecture and just makes your life a lot easier. If you really like this episode, then let me know if there are any more feed rules. Maybe send me a message and ask me what sort of the top feed rules are, which we use. It'd be maybe interesting to dive a little bit deeper into this, but it just goes to show how abstractly and how beyond just a normal feed optimization we think as an agency, as a top tier Google Ads agency, to make improvements to our clients' campaign setups. And if you want further Google Ads tips like this, then please don't hesitate to reach out. As I've just said, it's jeremy@younganddigital.marketing, or send me a message on LinkedIn. It's Jeremy Young Google Ads, or you can book a one-to-one consultation with me via the website younganddigital.marketing. We have 2 more slots for one-to-one coaching available for the new year. 1 slot is already filled. There may be already another person interested in a coaching slot. So you have to please act fast if you still want to book that slot with me for the new year to bring your Google Ads to the next level. Again, this has been Jeremy Young with Google Ads Unleashed. Thank you very much for your time today, and I'll see you in the next episode.